I sat across from my daughter-in-law in that conference room, and I did something I'd spent almost 2 years preparing for. I spoke to her in Chinese. Her face went white, because Lisa had no idea I understood every word she'd been saying for months, every phone call, every whispered conversation, every plan she thought was secret. She looked at me like I'd just pulled a weapon, and in a way I had. "You've been spying on me," she whispered. What she didn't know was why. Why a 68-year-old woman would spend nearly 2 years secretly learning an entire language. Why I'd hidden it from everyone, even my own son. Why I'd listened to her conversations and said nothing until this moment. But when she finally told me the truth, when the rage and grief came pouring out, when I learned who she really was and what she'd been planning to do to my son, to my company, to everything I'd built, I understood something terrible. My name is Joyce Spencer, and this is my story. I thought I had finally figured out how to read people. 40 years of building a business from nothing teaches you that skill, or at least I believed it did. You learn to spot the liars, the cheaters, the ones who smile while their hands are in the register. But standing in my office on the 3rd floor of the building I bought with my first real profit, watching the Seattle rain streak down the windows, I could not shake the feeling that I had missed something important. Something about my daughter-in-law. Lisa Wang had been married to my son Andrew for 2 years. They met at Spencer Company 5 years ago when she started in our accounting department. They dated for 3 years before the wedding, and the whole time I told myself I liked her. She was smart, organized, always on time. She brought Andrew coffee in the mornings and laughed at his jokes during company lunches. But there were moments, small ones, where her smile dropped the second she thought no one was watching, where her eyes went flat and cold before snapping back to warmth. I told myself I was imagining things. That morning, I walked down to Andrew's office with the quarterly reports tucked under my arm. His door was half open, and I could hear him on the phone, his voice easy and relaxed. When he saw me, he waved me in and wrapped up the call. "Morning, Mom." He stood up and took the reports, setting them on his desk without looking at them. "You didn't have to bring these yourself. I could have come up." I needed to stretch my legs. I sat in the chair across from him and watched him settle back into his own. My son, 38 years old, tall like his father but with my stubborn jaw. He ran his hand through his hair, a habit he had since he was a kid. "How's Lisa doing? I haven't seen her much this week." "She's good. Busy with the end-of-month close." He smiled, the kind of smile that said he was happy. That should have been enough for me. "We're thinking about driving up to Vancouver next weekend if you don't need me here. Go. Take the time." He nodded and we talked through a few personnel issues, nothing major. When I left, I felt the familiar warmth of knowing my son was settled, that he had someone. I had raised him alone after his father left, worked 2 jobs for years while building Spencer Company into something real. Andrew deserved happiness. But that warmth lasted only until I reached the stairwell and heard Lisa's voice drifting up from the 2nd-floor landing. She was speaking Chinese, her tone different than the one she used around me. Sharper, faster. Then I heard my name, clear as anything, dropped into the middle of that stream of words I could not understand. "Joyce Spencer." I froze, one hand on the railing. She kept talking, her voice steady and businesslike, and then she laughed. Not the warm laugh she used at family dinners, something colder. I should have kept walking. Instead, I stood there like an idiot, listening to words I could not comprehend, until I heard her footsteps coming up. I moved quickly, pushed through the door to the 3rd-floor hallway, and walked back toward my office like I had been headed that direction all along. Lisa emerged from the stairwell seconds later. When she saw me, her face shifted immediately into a smile. "Oh, Joyce, hi. I didn't know you were down here. Just dropped off reports for Andrew." My voice sounded normal, I think. "Heading back up now." "Great. I'll see you later." She walked past me toward the elevator, still holding her phone. I stood in the hallway after she left and told myself it meant nothing. People say names in conversations all the time. Maybe she was talking to a friend about work. Maybe she was explaining something about the company. There were a dozen reasonable explanations, but my chest felt tight anyway. 2 weeks later, Andrew and Lisa came over for dinner. I lived in Queen Anne, in a condo with tall windows and a view of the Sound. I bought it 15 years ago when the company had its best year. The building was quiet, mostly professionals and retirees. The kitchen was big enough to cook in properly, and the back deck caught the evening light. Lisa brought flowers, white lilies, and helped me set the table while Andrew opened a bottle of wine. She asked about my week, complimented the salmon I had roasted, told a funny story about a mix-up with a vendor. Everything felt normal until her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and excused herself, stepping out onto the back deck and closing the sliding door behind her. Through the glass I watched her answer. She paced while she talked, her free hand moving in quick gestures. She was speaking Chinese again. I could not hear her clearly, but I saw her mouth forming those unfamiliar sounds. She laughed once, said something fast, then turned and saw me watching. Her expression did not change, but something flickered behind her eyes. She ended the call quickly and came back inside. Sorry about that. My aunt. She talks forever. Lisa smiled at me and sat back down, picking up her fork like nothing had happened. But I had not heard warmth in that laugh. I had heard something else. Andrew, oblivious, refilled her wine and started talking about a client meeting. Lisa listened and nodded and played the role of the attentive wife. I tried to focus on my food, but I kept replaying that moment on the deck. The way she had turned and seen me. The way her face had stayed smooth and pleasant, while her eyes had gone watchful. After they left, I stood at my kitchen sink and washed dishes slowly, my hands in the warm soapy water. The house felt too quiet. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was a tired old woman looking for problems where there were none. But I could not stop thinking about her voice on that phone call. The sharpness of it. The following week, Lisa invited me to lunch. She said she wanted to spend more time together, just the two of us. We had done this before, occasional lunches where we made polite conversation, but something about the timing felt deliberate. I agreed anyway, hoping maybe I had been wrong about everything. We met at a Chinese restaurant on South Jackson Street, a place with red lanterns in the windows and the smell of ginger and garlic hitting you the second you walked in. We ordered dumplings and noodles. Lisa talked about a project at work, about a trip she and Andrew were planning. She said all the right things. But when her phone buzzed and she glanced at it, I saw her jaw tighten for just a second before she silenced it and put it face down on the table. Everything okay? I asked. Fine. Just a friend. She picked up her tea and sipped it, her face calm again. Halfway through the meal, a woman stopped by our table. She was younger, maybe late 20s, and she greeted Lisa in rapid Chinese. Lisa stood and hugged her, and they spoke back and forth, their words tumbling over each other. I sat there with my chopsticks in my hand, smiling politely, understanding nothing. The woman glanced at me once, said something, and Lisa responded. They both laughed. Then the woman left and Lisa sat back down. Sorry. Old friend from college. I haven't seen her in forever. No problem. I picked up a dumpling and tried to sound casual. What were you two talking about? Oh, just catching up. Her job, her boyfriend, boring stuff. Lisa picked up her chopsticks and ate a bite of noodles, her expression relaxed. But I had seen the way her friend had looked at me. And I had heard my name again, nestled in that stream of incomprehensible words. That night, I called Andrew. I did not plan to say anything, but when he asked how lunch went, the words came out before I could stop them. It was fine. But Andrew, does Lisa ever talk about me? To her friends, I mean. He paused. What do you mean? I just noticed today she was speaking Chinese with someone, and I thought I heard my name. Mom. His voice shifted, patient but edged with frustration. People say names. It doesn't mean anything. I know, but I just feel like you're being paranoid, he said, cutting me off. He sighed. Lisa likes you. She's been nothing but good to me, to us. Can you please stop looking for problems? The words hit harder than he probably meant them to. I felt my face go hot. I'm not looking for problems. It feels like you are. Every time we talk lately, there's some comment about Lisa. She's my wife. Can you trust that I made a good choice? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to believe him, but something in my gut would not settle. Of course I trust you. Good. His voice softened. I love you, Mom, but you have to let this go. After we hung up, I sat on my couch in the dark and stared at the shadows on the ceiling. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was a paranoid old woman who had spent so many years protecting what I built that I saw threats everywhere. But late that night, lying in bed, I kept replaying all the small moments. Lisa's cold laugh on the deck, the way her friend had glanced at me, the sharpness in her voice when she did not know I was listening, and I realized something that made my stomach drop. I did not know what Lisa was saying, but she knew I could not understand, and that gave her a freedom I could not touch. I pulled my blanket up to my chin and told myself I was imagining things, but I did not believe it anymore. Before we continue, please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and subscribe to Never Too Old channel. We're creating a community of people who know that our best chapters can happen at any age. Now back to the story. The feeling did not go away. If anything, it grew sharper over the next few days, digging into me every time I saw Lisa at the office or heard her voice drift down the hallway. She always switched to Chinese when she took certain calls, always stepped away when the conversation turned to something I could not follow, and every time, I stood there useless, locked out of my own understanding. I tried to focus on work. We had a contract negotiation coming up, payroll issues to sort through, the usual problems that come with running a company. But my mind kept circling back to the same question. What was Lisa saying that I was not supposed to hear? On a Thursday evening, I found myself standing outside Mrs. Liu's door. She lived 2 units down from mine in the same building, had been my neighbor for almost 10 years. We were friendly in the way neighbors are, exchanging greetings in the hallway, occasionally sharing extra vegetables from the farmer's market. She was in her late 70s, a widow who had moved to Seattle decades ago, and still spoke with a crisp accent that made every word sound deliberate. I knocked before I could talk myself out of it. She opened the door wearing a cardigan and reading glasses pushed up into her silver hair. "Joyce, what a surprise. Come in." Her apartment smelled like jasmine tea and something herbal I could not name. The walls were covered with framed calligraphy and photographs of people I assumed were family. She gestured for me to sit at her small dining table and disappeared into the kitchen, returning with 2 cups of tea without asking if I wanted any. "You look troubled," she said, settling into the chair across from me. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup and tried to find the right words. "I need to ask you something. It's going to sound strange. Strange is better than boring." She sipped her tea and waited. "My daughter-in-law, Lisa. She speaks Chinese, and I've noticed she switches to it during certain conversations. I keep hearing my name, and I just feel like something is wrong, but I don't know what she's saying." Mrs. Liu's expression did not change, but her eyes sharpened. "You want to understand what your daughter-in-law is saying?" "Yes. I know it sounds paranoid." "Does it?" She set her cup down carefully. "Or does it sound like a mother who listens?" I felt something loosen in my chest. "My son thinks I'm imagining things. Maybe I am. Maybe you are not." Mrs. Liu leaned back in her chair, studying me. "You want me to teach you Mandarin?" I had not said it out loud yet, but hearing her say it made the idea feel both possible and completely absurd. "I don't know. I thought maybe I could record conversations, and you could translate them for me. That would be easier than trying to learn a whole language." Mrs. Liu shook her head slowly. "What if the important conversation happens when I am not here? What if you need to act immediately, and the recording is not clear? What if there are gaps, or the phone cuts out, or she speaks too fast? Then I bring it to you later, and we figure it out." 2 days later, 3 days later, a week later. Mrs. Liu's voice was firm now, almost sharp. "You want to catch a thief, you learn to see in the dark yourself. You do not ask someone else to shine a light for you when the thief is already gone." The words hit me harder than I expected. I stared down at my tea and saw my own reflection rippling on the surface. "I need to understand in real time," I said quietly. "Yes, you do." I hesitated, then admitted what had been gnawing at me. "I don't know if I can learn something this hard." Mrs. Liu made a dismissive sound. "I taught Mandarin for 30 years at Seattle Central College. My oldest student was 82, and she learned faster than the teenagers because she actually practiced. You know what matters? Discipline, commitment. You have built a business from nothing. You think learning tones is harder than that?" Her words settled something in me, but I still felt the weight of doubt pressing down. Learning a new language felt like trying to build a house with tools I had never held. But then I stopped myself. I was 68, not dead. My brain worked just fine. I had taught myself accounting software at 50, rebuilt the company's entire inventory system at 62, and learned to navigate international shipping regulations last year when we expanded. Every decade of my life, someone had told me I was too old, too late, too set in my ways to do something new, and every time, I proved them wrong. This would be no different. I was not too old to learn. I was experienced enough to know that hard work beats excuses every single time. I looked at Mrs. Liu and felt something shift inside me. Not confidence exactly, but determination. "I'm serious," I said. Mrs. Liu nodded once. "Then we start tomorrow." That night, I lay awake and wondered what I had just agreed to. But the alternative was worse. The alternative was standing blind while something happened to my son, to my company, to everything I had spent a lifetime building. The next evening I knocked on Mrs. Liu's door at 6 o'clock. She let me in without ceremony and pointed to the chair at her dining table. A notebook and pen sat waiting for me. "We begin with tones," she said, sitting across from me. "Mandarin has 4 tones and 1 neutral tone. The tone changes the meaning completely. Same sound, different tone, different word. You must hear the difference." She demonstrated, her voice rising and falling in patterns that sounded musical and impossible. I tried to repeat what she said. My voice came out flat and uncertain. "No. Listen again." She repeated the sound slowly, exaggerating each rise and fall. "Try." I tried. Over and over, while she corrected me with a patience that somehow felt more demanding than kindness. By the end of the first hour, my throat was tired and my head ached from concentrating. "Enough for tonight," Mrs. Liu said. "Practice what I showed you. Listen to the recordings I will send you. Come back on Sunday." I walked back to my unit feeling both exhausted and strangely awake. That night, I sat on my couch with my phone and listened to the audio files she had sent, trying to hear the difference between sounds that all seemed identical to my ear. The weeks that followed were the hardest learning I had done since college. I met with Mrs. Liu 3 times a week, sometimes more. She drilled me on tones until I could barely hear the difference between what I was saying and what I was supposed to say. She taught me simple words, basic phrases, the building blocks of a language that felt nothing like English. I said mother, and it came out sounding like horse. Mrs. Liu shook her head. "Your tone is wrong, again." I tried to say book, but used the wrong sound at the beginning, and ended up with something that made her sigh. "Not that sound. Listen. The sound comes from farther back. Try again." Every mistake felt enormous. Every correction reminded me how far I had to go. I bought notebooks and filled them with characters I copied carefully from apps and websites Mrs. Liu recommended. I hid them in my bedroom closet, tucked behind old sweaters, where Andrew would not see them if he stopped by. I practiced in my car during lunch breaks, repeating words into the silence while other people walked past in the parking lot. At work, I started listening differently. When Lisa spoke Chinese on the phone, or with the occasional vendor who came through, I tried to pick out sounds I recognized. Most of it was still noise, a river of syllables I could not separate into meaning. But every so often, I caught a word. Money. Soon. Mother. He. The word he made my stomach tighten. She was talking about someone male. Andrew? Someone else? I could not tell yet. But I was starting to hear shapes inside the noise. Andrew came over for dinner one night in late November, about 2 months into my lessons. Lisa was working late, he said, so it was just the 2 of us. We ate roasted chicken and talked about a supplier issue at the company, and for a little while it felt like old times, easy, comfortable. But when he got up to leave, he paused at the door and looked at me with something I could not quite read. "You seem distracted lately, Mom. Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Just tired." "You're working too much. You should take a vacation or something." I smiled and told him I would think about it, and he left believing I was fine. But I was not fine. I was spending every spare hour learning a language in secret, hiding notebooks like a teenager hiding a diary, lying to my son because I could not explain what I was doing without sounding insane. And the worst part was, I still did not know if I was right. Maybe Lisa was exactly who she seemed. Maybe I was destroying my relationship with my son over nothing, but I could not stop. By early December, I had been studying for nearly 4 months. My progress felt agonizingly slow, but Mrs. Liu insisted I was doing well. I could recognize more words now, could sometimes follow the general topic of a conversation, even if I missed most of the details. I understood greetings, numbers, time words, small pieces of meaning floating in a sea of sound. Then one afternoon I was walking past the break room on the 2nd floor when I heard Lisa's voice. She was on her phone, speaking Chinese, her tone casual and unhurried. I stopped just outside the doorway, out of sight, and listened. Most of it was still too fast, too complicated. But then I heard a phrase I recognized. Every word clear and unmistakable. Everything is going according to plan. My hands went cold. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding so hard I thought she might hear it. She kept talking, her voice steady and confident, and then she laughed. That same cold laugh I had heard on my deck months ago. I forced myself to keep walking, to move past the doorway like I had heard nothing. I made it back to my office and closed the door and sat down at my desk, staring at the wall. Everything is going according to plan. What plan? I opened my desk drawer and pulled out my phone, pulling up Mrs. Liu's contact. I needed to tell her what I had heard. I needed to know I had understood correctly. But even as I typed the message, I knew the truth. I had understood. And whatever Lisa was planning, it was already in motion. I sent Mrs. Liu a message that night after I heard Lisa say those words. Everything is going according to plan. She replied within minutes, asking me to come over. When I knocked on her door, she was already brewing tea. I sat at her table and told her exactly what I had heard, repeating the phrase slowly to make sure I had it right. Mrs. Liu nodded. Your understanding is correct. She said exactly that. But what plan? What is she doing? That, I cannot tell you from one sentence. She poured tea into my cup, her movements careful and precise. You need to hear more. Understand more. Keep listening. So I did. In the months that followed, my lessons with Mrs. Liu intensified. She taught me business vocabulary, financial terms, words I might hear in the context of work, numbers, dates, transaction words. I practiced until my mouth was tired and my brain felt stretched thin, but slowly, painfully, my comprehension grew. By the time spring arrived, I had been learning for half a year. I could pick out more words from Lisa's conversations now, though I still lost the thread when she spoke too fast or used phrases I had not learned yet. It was like trying to watch a movie through a foggy window. I could see shapes, catch pieces, but the full picture stayed just out of reach. One afternoon in March, I was reviewing vendor contracts when I heard Lisa's voice in the hallway outside my office. She was speaking Chinese, her tone low and focused. I got up quietly and moved closer to my door, which I had left slightly open. I caught words. Money. Transfer. Next month. Offshore. My chest tightened. Offshore. That word I knew. It meant foreign banks, accounts outside the country. Why would Lisa be talking about offshore accounts? She kept talking, her voice steady, and then I heard her laugh. Not the warm sound she used around Andrew. Something colder. I stood there until her voice faded down the hallway, then sat back at my desk and stared at the contract in front of me without seeing it. Lisa was doing something with money. Something secret. Something that involved accounts far away where transactions were harder to trace. That night, I went back to Mrs. Liu and told her what I had heard. Offshore account, I said. Why would she be talking about offshore accounts? Mrs. Liu's expression stayed neutral, but her eyes sharpened. People use offshore accounts for many reasons, some legal, some not. What if she's stealing? Then you need proof, and you need to understand more than scattered words. She was right. I was hearing pieces of something, but I did not know what the something was yet. The next week, I started going through company finances more carefully. Not the broad overview I usually reviewed, but the details, individual transactions, vendor payments, account transfers. I told myself I was just being thorough, but I knew what I was really doing. I was looking for anything that felt wrong, and I found it. Small discrepancies, payments that seemed slightly high, invoices from vendors I did not recognize. Nothing dramatic enough to trigger alarms, but enough to make my stomach drop. I took screenshots, saved records, and said nothing to anyone. In early April, the company held a reception for a new client in the building's conference room. It was a small event, maybe 30 people, with catered food and wine. Andrew was there with Lisa, both of them dressed professionally and playing their roles perfectly. I watched them across the room, my son's hand on his wife's back, her smile bright and easy. I was talking to one of our suppliers when I saw Lisa step away toward the hallway, her phone to her ear. She was speaking Chinese again. I excused myself and followed at a distance, staying out of sight near the doorway. She stood by the window at the end of the hall, her back to me, her voice quick and focused. I concentrated hard, picking through the sounds for words I knew. I caught scattered words. Friday, transfer, Andrew's name, computer. Then one more word that made my heart slam against my ribs. Password. My hands went cold. I did not understand the full sentence, did not catch every word between those pieces, but I understood enough. Something was happening on Friday, something involving a transfer of money and Andrew's computer access. I turned and walked back to the reception on legs that felt unsteady. I smiled at people, made small talk, and left as soon as I could without drawing attention. That night, I sat in my living room with my phone in my hand, staring at the dark windows. It was Wednesday. Whatever Lisa was planning, it was happening in 2 days. I could not wait. I could not record and translate and confirm. I had to act now. I called our IT manager at home and apologized for the late hour. I told him I needed Andrew's system access credentials changed immediately for security reasons. He asked if there was a specific threat, and I said I had concerns about a potential breach and wanted to be cautious. He agreed to handle it first thing in the morning. I did not sleep that night. Friday came and went. I heard nothing unusual, saw nothing out of place, but on Monday, Andrew came to my office and closed the door behind him. Mom, why did you have it change my access codes without telling me? I looked up from my desk, trying to keep my face calm. Security precaution. We've had some vendor issues, and I wanted to tighten things up. You could have told me first. I couldn't get into half my files on Friday. It was embarrassing. I'm sorry. I should have given you a heads up. He stood there for a moment, studying me with an expression I could not read. Are you okay? You've been acting strange lately. I'm fine, just stressed with work. You sure? Because Lisa mentioned you've seemed distant. And now this thing with my access codes. It feels like you don't trust me. The words hit harder than I expected. I wanted to tell him everything. About the Chinese lessons, about the conversations I had been overhearing, about the terrifying fragments I was piecing together. But I could not. Not yet. Not without more proof. Of course I trust you. This had nothing to do with you personally. It was just a security measure. He nodded slowly, but the doubt in his eyes stayed. Okay, just talk to me next time. After he left, I sat at my desk and felt the weight of what I was doing. I was lying to my son, investigating his wife in secret, acting on half-understood conversations in a language I barely spoke, and every action I took pushed him further away. But I could not stop. Over the following weeks I kept listening. I caught more pieces, more fragments that built a picture I did not want to see. One day in late April, I heard Lisa on the phone in the stairwell. I was 2 floors above, heading down, when her voice drifted up. She was speaking Chinese, and I stopped on the landing to listen. I caught words scattered through the conversation. Investigate. Andrew's name. Clear and unmistakable. Something that sounded like police or authorities. And then, later another phrase. When I leave. My blood went cold. Each word on its own meant nothing, but together they formed a pattern I could not ignore. Lisa was planning something that would bring investigators to our door. My son's name was connected to it, and she intended to be gone when it happened. The picture came together in my mind like pieces of broken glass forming a terrible shape. Lisa was stealing money. She was using Andrew's access to do it, or setting it up to look like he was involved, and when the authorities came looking, she would have already disappeared. My son would be left holding the blame for whatever she had done. I walked down the rest of the stairs in a daze and made it back to my office before my legs gave out. I sat in my chair and stared at the wall, my mind racing. I had to tell someone. I had to stop this. But who would believe me? I had fragments of overheard conversations in a language I was still learning. I had small financial discrepancies that could be explained away. I had a theory built on partial understanding and growing fear. If I went to Andrew, he would think I was paranoid. If I went to the authorities, they would ask for proof I did not have yet. I needed more. I needed to understand the full scope of what Lisa was planning before I could act. That night, I met with Mrs. Liu and laid out everything I had heard. She listened carefully, her face serious. You are hearing pieces of something big, she said when I finished. But you are right. You need more before you can stop her. You need to know the timeline, the amounts, the specifics. Right now you have suspicions, you need facts. How much longer before I can understand full conversations? Mrs. Liu considered. You have been learning for almost a year. Your progress is good, better than I expected. But understanding natural fast speech in a business context? Another few months, maybe more. It depends on how much you practice. I don't have months. She's accelerating. I can feel it. Then you practice harder, you listen more carefully, and you keep gathering evidence, piece by piece, until you have enough. I left her apartment that night feeling the weight of time pressing down on me. Lisa was moving forward with whatever she had planned, and I was racing to understand it before it was too late. But there was something else too. Something that nagged at me every time I replayed the fragments I had heard. One afternoon, I had overheard Lisa speaking with someone in the break room. Most of the conversation was too fast for me to follow, but I caught her tone. Pure venom, and one word, deserves. She deserves this. Or maybe, she deserves what's coming. I could not tell which. But the hatred in her voice was unmistakable. This was not just about money. This felt personal. I did not understand why. I had never done anything to Lisa. I had tried to be kind, to welcome her into our family. What could I have done to make her hate me like that? The question haunted me, but I pushed it aside. I could figure out the why later. Right now, I needed to focus on the what, on stopping whatever Lisa was planning before my son paid the price for it. By early summer, I had been learning Chinese for a full year. My comprehension had grown in ways I would not have believed possible when I started. I could follow general conversations now if I concentrated, could pick out meaning from context even when I missed individual words. I was not fluent, not even close, but I was no longer helpless. And what I understood terrified me. Lisa was stealing from the company. She was setting up Andrew to take the fall, and she was planning to disappear, leaving my son to face the consequences alone. I did not know when, I did not know how much, but I knew it was coming soon. And I knew I was running out of time to stop it. I could not keep waiting for the pieces to fall into place on their own. By late summer, my Chinese had improved enough that I could follow most conversations if I focused hard. The words no longer slipped past me like water. I could catch them, hold them, understand what they meant. And what I understood was that I was running out of time. I contacted a lawyer in August. Not someone connected to the company, but a private attorney who specialized in corporate fraud. I met him at his office downtown and laid out what I had. The financial discrepancies I had found. The recordings I had made of Lisa's conversations, with translations I had written out carefully. The pattern of behavior that pointed to embezzlement and a plan to frame my son. He listened without interrupting, his expression neutral. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and studied me. "This is serious," he said. "If what you're saying is true, your daughter-in-law is setting up a sophisticated fraud scheme. But I need to ask, do you know why?" "What do you mean?" "Fraud at this level takes planning. Years, probably. People don't do this just for money. There's usually a motive. Revenge, desperation, something personal. Do you have any idea what would drive her to target you and your son specifically?" I shook my head. I've tried to be good to her. I welcomed her into the family. I don't understand why she would hate me. Then we need to find out. In the meantime, I'll start building a case with what you have. Keep gathering evidence, and if you hear anything about timelines or specific transactions, let me know immediately. I left his office feeling both relieved and more anxious than before. I had someone on my side now, someone who believed me. But the question he had asked stayed with me. Why? The answer felt close, like something I should be able to see but could not quite reach. 2 weeks later, I was working late at the office. It was after 7, and most of the building was empty. I was finishing up some paperwork when I heard Lisa's voice coming from the floor below. She must have stayed late too. I moved quietly to the stairwell and listened. She was on her phone, speaking Chinese. Her voice was focused, businesslike. I caught enough to understand she was talking about accounts in Shanghai. Someone, an aunt maybe, had confirmed that everything was ready on that end. Then Lisa said something that made my stomach drop. "Execute in 2 months. Make sure the timing is perfect." 2 months. I had 2 months before whatever she was planning went into motion. I stayed in the stairwell until her voice faded, then went back to my office and immediately called my lawyer. He answered on the second ring. "I just overheard a conversation," I said, keeping my voice low even though the floor was empty. "Lisa has accounts set up in Shanghai. She's planning to execute something in 2 months. I think she's about to move money. Can you get me account information? Names, numbers, anything specific? Maybe, but shouldn't we stop her now? Freeze the accounts before she can move anything? No. His answer was immediate and firm. If we freeze those accounts now, she'll know we're on to her. She'll either disappear or change tactics completely. We need to catch her in the act with enough evidence to prove intent and protect your son. Let her think everything is going according to plan. We'll be ready to stop her when she actually makes the move. But what if we're too late? What if she gets away with it? That's why you need to keep gathering information. Every detail you can get. Account numbers, names, dates, amounts. The more we have, the stronger our case when we confront her. I hung up feeling sick. I had to watch Lisa move forward with her plan, knowing what was coming, unable to stop it yet. Over the next few days, I listened more carefully than I ever had. I stayed late at the office, positioned myself near places where Lisa took calls, and caught pieces of conversations that slowly built a picture. One evening, Lisa stayed past 8, working on something in her office. I was 2 doors down. My door cracked open just enough to hear. She made a call, speaking Chinese, and I heard her give information. Account numbers, names I did not recognize, locations. I grabbed my phone and typed everything into my notes as quietly as I could, my hands shaking. I sent the information to my lawyer that night. He confirmed he was documenting everything, building the case we would need, but it did not make the waiting any easier. Over the following weeks I kept listening, and the more I heard, the more confused I became. One afternoon in mid-September, I overheard Lisa talking to someone in the parking lot after work. I was in my car, about to leave, when I saw her standing by her vehicle with her phone pressed to her ear. I rolled down my window slightly and stayed very still. "I've waited 15 years for this," she said in Chinese, her voice tight with emotion. "She took everything from me. Now I'm taking everything from her." 15 years. I sat frozen behind the wheel, trying to understand. 15 years ago, Lisa would have been 17 or 18. What could I have possibly done to her back then? I did not even know her back then. Nothing made sense. The next week, I caught another fragment. Lisa was in the break room, speaking on the phone, and I stood just outside the doorway listening. "I want her to suffer," she said, and the venom in her voice made my skin go cold. "She destroyed my family. Now I destroy hers. She'll lose everything and know that I did it. My family, not her family. Mine." But I still could not put the pieces together. What had I done? Who had I hurt? I met with Mrs. Liu that night and played her the recordings I had made. She listened carefully, her expression growing more troubled. "This is very personal," Mrs. Liu said when the recordings ended. "She hates you for something specific, something that happened a long time ago. 15 years, she said. But I don't know what it could be. I didn't know her 15 years ago. Maybe not her directly. But you did something, or she believes you did something, that destroyed her family." Mrs. Liu looked at me steadily. "You need to be careful. This woman is not rational. She wants revenge more than she wants money. That makes her dangerous." I already knew that, but hearing Mrs. Liu say it out loud made it feel more real. Then, in mid-October, I overheard the conversation that made everything clear and terrifying. Lisa was on the phone in an empty conference room. I was walking past when I heard her speaking Chinese and stopped. 3 more weeks, Lisa said. Then the company collapses, he goes to prison, and she watches everything destroyed. I pressed my back against the wall outside the room and forced myself to keep listening. I never cared about the money. I want her to lose everything. Her business, her son, her reputation. I want her to end up with nothing, just like I did. My heart was pounding so hard I thought she would hear it through the wall. This was not about stealing money and disappearing. This was about total destruction. Lisa wanted the company to fail, wanted Andrew to go to prison, wanted me to watch it all collapse. She was not planning to escape with anything. She was planning to burn it all down and walk away knowing we were ruined. I made it back to my office and closed the door before my hands started shaking. I sat at my desk and tried to process what I had just heard. Lisa had spent years planning this, years positioning herself, building this elaborate scheme, all so she could destroy me and my son, and I still did not know why, but I was out of time to figure it out. That night, I called my lawyer and told him everything. "We need to move now," he said. If she's planning to execute in 3 weeks, we can't wait any longer. Do you have enough evidence? I have recordings, translations, financial records, proof she's been embezzling and setting up my son to take the fall. Then we confront her. We bring in the authorities. We stop this before she can finish what she started. I agreed, though my stomach twisted as I said it. The next day, I set everything in motion. I contacted the authorities and provided them with the evidence I had gathered. I secured the company's financial records and locked down Andrew's access to critical systems to protect him. I prepared for the confrontation I knew was coming. But even as I did all of this, the question haunted me. Why did Lisa hate me this much? What had I done to make her willing to destroy her own life just to watch mine fall apart? I did not have the answer, but I was about to find out. The confrontation happened in the conference room on the 3rd floor, the one with windows that looked out over the city. I chose it deliberately. Neutral ground, professional, a place where business got handled. My lawyer sat to my right, a folder of documents in front of him. The authorities had been contacted, were standing by. Andrew sat across from me, confused about why I had called this meeting, and Lisa sat next to him, her expression carefully neutral, like she was preparing for another routine discussion about quarterly projections. She had no idea what was coming. "Thank you both for coming," I said, keeping my voice steady. "There's something we need to discuss, something serious." Andrew frowned. "Mom, what's this about? You sounded urgent on the phone." I looked at Lisa. Her face showed polite concern, but her eyes were watchful, calculating. "This is about financial irregularities at the company," I said. "Embezzlement, fraud, and a plan to destroy everything I've built." Lisa's expression didn't change, but I saw her hands tighten slightly on the armrest of her chair. Andrew looked between us, his confusion deepening. "What are you talking about?" I kept my eyes on Lisa. "I know what you've been doing. The embezzlement, the offshore accounts in Shanghai, the plan to frame Andrew and make it look like he was responsible. I know all of it." "Mom," Andrew's voice rose. "What are you saying?" Lisa spoke then, her voice calm and measured. "Joyce, I don't know what you think you've discovered, but I can assure you there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding." I slid a folder across the table toward her. "I have recordings, translations, financial records showing money being moved through shell companies and offshore accounts, proof that you've been systematically stealing from this company and setting up my son to take the fall." Lisa opened the folder. Her face stayed perfectly composed as she looked through the papers, but I saw the muscles in her jaw tighten. "These are just normal transactions," she said after a moment. "You're misinterpreting standard accounting procedures." "Am I?" I leaned forward slightly. "Then explain the accounts in Shanghai, the ones your aunt helped you set up, the ones you planned to transfer money into before disappearing and letting Andrew face the investigators." Andrew stood up, his chair scraping back. "Mom, stop. This is insane. Lisa wouldn't do that." "Sit down, Andrew." My voice came out harder than I intended. He sat, but his face was pale with shock and anger. Lisa closed the folder and pushed it back toward me. "You can't prove any of this. These recordings, if they even exist, they're out of context, and financial records can be explained. You're reaching because you've never liked me, and now you're trying to destroy my marriage." I took a breath. This was the moment. The one I had been preparing for since I first heard her voice on that phone call over a year ago. I spoke in Chinese. 我听懂了你说的每一个字, which means, I understood every word you said. The color drained from Lisa's face. She stopped breathing. Her hands went completely still on the table. I continued in English, my voice steady. "I've been learning Chinese for almost 2 years, so I could understand what you were saying." The silence in the room was absolute. Andrew stared at me like I had grown a second head. Lisa's carefully constructed mask cracked, her eyes going wide with something between shock and fury. "Every phone call," I said quietly. "Every conversation you thought was private. I heard them. I understood them. Execute in 2 months. 3 more weeks until the company collapses. I want her to suffer." "I heard all of it, Lisa. You." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "You've been spying on me. I've been protecting my son." Lisa's face flushed red. Her hands started shaking, and when she spoke again, her voice was raw with rage. "You want to know why, Lisa?" My lawyer's voice was calm but warning. "I'd advise you not to say anything further without counsel present." She ignored him. Years of planning, years of control, all of it was crumbling, and I could see it breaking her open. Tony Zhao, she said, her voice shaking. My father. He worked here for decades. He was loyal. He was good at his job, and you fired him with some poor excuse about restructuring. 3 days after you fired him, he had a heart attack and died. The shame killed him, and 6 months later, my mother died of cancer because we couldn't afford her treatments anymore. I was 17 years old and alone because of you. The name hit me hard. Tony Zhao. I remembered him. Quiet man. Good with numbers. Always on time. I had fired him after discovering he had been stealing from the company. But I didn't remember him having a daughter. Tony had a daughter? I said. My voice barely steady. I didn't know he had a daughter. Lisa laughed, bitter and broken. Of course you didn't, because I wasn't the respectable daughter. My mother was his mistress, the secret family he kept hidden for years. When he died, his real wife and his legitimate children got everything. The house, the insurance, the respectable widow story. We got nothing. Andrew made a sound like he had been punched. Lisa. She turned on him, tears streaming down her face now. Of course I didn't tell you. I needed you. You were a weapon, Andrew. A tool to hurt her. I made you fall in love with me so I could destroy you both. I watched my son's face change. Watched the betrayal sink in and hollow him out. You married me to hurt my mother, he said quietly. I didn't want the money, Lisa said, her voice breaking. I wanted her to suffer. I wanted the company destroyed, you in prison, her reputation ruined. I wanted her to watch everything fall apart. 5 years I planned this. 5 years of pretending, of playing the perfect wife, of waiting for the right moment. She looked at me with pure hatred. You were supposed to lose everything, just like I did. The room fell silent except for Lisa's ragged breathing. Andrew sat frozen, his hands gripping the edge of the table. My lawyer looked uncomfortable but unsurprised. I spoke quietly, my voice steady despite the horror washing through me. Your father was stealing from my company. Over $200,000 in 14 months. I had proof, forensic audits, everything documented. I could have sent him to prison, destroyed his name publicly, made sure everyone knew what he had done. Instead, I fired him quietly and told people it was restructuring. I thought I was showing mercy by protecting his reputation, protecting his family. You're lying, Lisa's voice cracked. My father wasn't a thief. He would never steal. I kept the records. I can show you everything. She shook her head violently, but I saw the doubt creeping in behind the anger. Something clicked in my mind. A horrible, terrible understanding. I asked the question carefully, dreading the answer. When did your mother's cancer treatments get expensive? Lisa's face went still. What? The treatments? When did they start? The last year and a half before she died. Why does that matter? My stomach dropped. The timeline fit perfectly, horribly. The stealing happened over 14 months, I said quietly. $200,000 taken in 14 months. The silence stretched. I watched understanding dawn on Lisa's face, watched her try to reject it, watched it settle into horrible certainty. He was stealing to save your mother, I said. No. Lisa's voice was barely audible. No, he told me he had savings. He said we could afford it. He couldn't tell you the truth. He couldn't tell anyone without exposing his second family, without destroying his legitimate wife and children with the shame of what he had done. I felt tears burning behind my eyes. I didn't know you existed, Lisa. I thought I was protecting his respectable family when I fired him quietly. I didn't know about you, about your mother. Andrew finally spoke, his voice hollow and distant. Did you ever love me? Lisa looked at him, tears streaming down her face. I married you for revenge. That's the truth. But I fell in love with you anyway. That made it worse because I knew what I was doing, and I couldn't stop. You didn't deserve any of this. Andrew's hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against the table but couldn't make them still. My lawyer cleared his throat gently. Mrs. Spencer, given the circumstances and the evidence, we have grounds to press charges for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. However, that's ultimately your decision. I looked at Lisa. 17 years old and alone. Her father dead from shame and a broken heart. Her mother dead from cancer. Everything stripped away. She had built her whole adult life around destroying me, and now that plan had fallen apart and left her with nothing all over again. I'm not pressing charges, I said. My lawyer looked surprised. Lisa's head jerked up, her eyes red and swollen. Your father made desperate choices out of love, I said. You made desperate choices out of grief. You need to heal, not sit in prison. Why? Lisa's voice was ragged. After everything I tried to do to you, to Andrew, why would you show me mercy? Because I should have shown more of it to your father. Maybe if I had dug deeper, asked more questions, tried to understand why a loyal employee would suddenly start stealing, none of this would have happened. I thought I was being kind by firing him quietly. I didn't realize I was taking away the only lifeline your mother had. Lisa broke down completely then, her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs that sounded like they were tearing her apart. Across from her, Andrew sat with tears running down his face, staring at his wedding ring like he didn't recognize it. And I sat there crying too, for the young girl left alone, for the desperate father who had tried to save the woman he loved, for the mercy I had thought I was showing that had instead destroyed a hidden family I never knew existed. We sat there in that conference room, all three of us broken by the truth, Lisa crying for the years she had wasted on hatred, for the parents she would never get back. Andrew crying for the marriage that had been built on lies, for the love that had been real but poisoned at its foundation, and me crying for choices made without full understanding, for mercy that had been incomplete, for all the ways good intentions could still cause so much harm. The afternoon light came through the windows and fell across the table between us. Outside, the city moved on, people going about their lives, unaware that in this room, three people were watching everything they thought they knew collapse into rubble and truth. The days after the confrontation moved in a strange, slow motion. Lisa packed her things from the house she had shared with Andrew and left within a week. She didn't fight the separation, didn't argue or make demands. She signed the papers the lawyer drew up and moved out on a Tuesday morning while Andrew was at work. I helped him go through the house afterward. We boxed up what was hers and put it in storage, though neither of us knew if she would ever come back for it. Andrew moved through the rooms like a ghost, touching things she had touched, standing in doorways like he was trying to remember what it had felt like when everything was normal. I keep thinking I should hate her, he said one afternoon. We were in the kitchen, packing dishes, but I just feel empty. She loved you, I said quietly. That part was real. I know. That's what makes it worse. He wrapped a mug in newspaper and set it carefully in the box. If she had just been using me the whole time, it would be easier. But she fell in love with me while planning to destroy me. How do you make sense of that? I didn't have an answer. We kept packing in silence. Over the following weeks, Andrew stayed with me in my condo. He couldn't be in the house alone, he said, and I was glad for the company. We fell into a quiet routine. I made coffee in the mornings. He worked from my dining table. We ate dinner together and talked about small things, avoiding the subjects that hurt too much to touch. One evening, about a month after Lisa left, Andrew looked up from his laptop and watched me practice my Chinese characters at the kitchen counter. You learned an entire language for me, he said. I set down my pen. Yes, for almost 2 years. Alone. Without telling me. I didn't know how to explain it without sounding paranoid. He was quiet for a long moment. I'm sorry I didn't believe you when you tried to tell me something was wrong. You loved her. You were supposed to defend her. I should have listened to you too. I walked over and sat across from him. We both did what we thought was right with the information we had. That's all anyone can do. He nodded, but his eyes were still heavy with guilt and grief. The healing was slow. Some days were easier than others. Andrew started seeing a therapist. I kept meeting with Mrs. Liu for tea, though we rarely talked about Chinese anymore. She just let me sit in her quiet apartment and drink jasmine tea and not have to explain anything. 3 months after Lisa left, a letter arrived at my office. The return address was from Portland, but no name. I opened it carefully. The letter was short, written in Lisa's neat handwriting. Joyce, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm writing because I wanted you to know I'm getting help. Therapy, grief counseling, things I should have done years ago instead of building my life around hatred. I'm trying to understand who I am without the anger. It's hard. Some days I don't know who that person is. But I'm trying. Thank you for showing me mercy when you didn't have to. I'm learning what that word really means now. Lisa. I read it twice, then folded it carefully, and put it in my desk drawer. I didn't show it to Andrew. Maybe someday, but not yet. He was still healing, still learning how to trust himself again. 4 months after the confrontation, Mrs. Liu invited Andrew and me to dinner at a small Chinese restaurant near her building. It was the kind of place with plastic tablecloths and handwritten menus where the owner knew every regular by name. We sat at a corner table, the three of us, and Mrs. Liu handed us menus written entirely in Chinese. "You can read it now," she said to me. "Try." I squinted at the characters and slowly worked my way through the options. I messed up twice, confused similar-looking words, and Mrs. Liu corrected me with the same firm patience she had used from the beginning. "Better," she said, when I finally got the dish name right. "Your tones are still terrible, but better." Andrew smiled. It was small, but it was real. "How long did it take you to learn all this, Mom?" "Too long. I'm still learning." "But you did it. You actually did it. I would have learned anything to keep you safe." The food came and we ate slowly, talking about small things. Mrs. Liu told a story about her grandson's school play. Andrew mentioned a project at work. I complained about a vendor who kept sending the wrong invoices. Normal things, easy things, the kind of conversation that felt impossible a few months ago. At one point, Mrs. Liu looked at me across the table and said in Chinese, "You did well." I understood her. Not just the words, but the weight behind them. The years of work, the desperate fear, the choices made without full understanding. All of it leading to this moment, sitting in a restaurant with my son, both of us still here, still trying. "Thank you," I said back in Chinese. Mrs. Liu smiled and shook her head. I looked at Andrew across the table. He was eating his noodles and listening to Mrs. Liu talk, and his face looked less hollow than it had a month ago. We were both broken, both carrying pieces of truth that had shattered everything we thought we knew. But we were still here, still together, still learning how to move forward. The mercy I had shown Lisa was imperfect. The mercy I had tried to show her father all those years ago had been incomplete, built on assumptions and missing information. But it was still mercy, and maybe that was enough. Not to undo the harm, not to erase the pain, but to give everyone involved a chance to survive it. So, that's my story. I'd love to hear what you think. Would you have pressed charges against Lisa, or would you have let her go like I did? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe for more stories like mine.